Hello, and welcome to 365 Honest Questions About the Bible. I am your long-suffering host, Dante Stack, and we're doing this introduction today to talk about the 3 fears I have about doing this podcast. The first one's simple enough. It's the basic, what if no one listens to this podcast and I die sad and alone fear. But that's really true of any creative endeavor I would possibly do, so it's not particular to the goals of this podcast. So, nothing out of the ordinary. Fear 2, however, is a little bit more distinct. Perhaps you've heard of the famous book, How to Make Friends and Influence Others. Well, my fear is kind of that I would twist that into something more akin to how to lose friends and alienate others. There's a very real potential, I think, that I will alienate 2 people groups that I really want to engage with this podcast. That being the Christian community and at the opposite end of the spectrum, the atheistic community. I worry about the Christian community because the very point of this podcast is to dissect the Bible, to go through and naturally find passages of Scripture that I find difficult for one reason or another. These are passages that I don't understand. Sometimes they just don't make sense to me. Sometimes it might be a language issue, and other times they're just questions that hurt my soul. And in none of these situations are we going to have the answer for you. This is not the Bible Answer Man show. This is the Bible Question Man show. So in that, we want to wrestle like Jacob did. We want to ask questions like Job did. And we want to doubt like Thomas did. Now, doubt in and of itself is often a word that's very much poo-pooed in the Christian community. And so I fear that my doubting will be seen as lacking faith. Doubt also has this attachment to it that it's like a virus and we have to avoid it at all costs. But at least the way I'm defining that word, it's part of the process of having an authentic relationship and an authentic bridge to learning more and growing deeper in my understanding of who I believe God is. Now, you could probably already tell by the way I'm using that language that I could also very much alienate the atheistic community. I very much want to engage you if you're an atheist, and I want to take you into the Bible, and we should cover every single book of the Bible by the end of this. So I want to engage you even if this is maybe just your introduction to the Bible, because we're going to go through it and see what the Bible's really about. And we're going to do it often with what can be perceived as a pretty critical lens. However, you might be annoyed or irritated that at the end of the day, after all the questions I'm going to raise and potentially the ammunition I might be giving you, I'm still going to call myself a follower of Jesus and a believer that Jesus is God. So, right there, I might have already alienated you and might turn me off thinking that I'm dogmatic. I hope you're not. I hope you don't have that, and you'll continue to engage with me. You've been here 4 minutes or something like that. But for the long haul, you'll engage with me in this. This is something I want to do together. I think wrestling is a much richer experience when done in community. I've never been a real wrestler, but, figurative wrestling. I think it's good for all of us. Real quickly here, I want to go over a couple of the things that this podcast is not. It's not going to be a debate on systems or people or theologies that branch out from the Bible. For instance, I'm not going to go in debating Calvinism versus Arminianism or talking about how good of a person Martin Luther was. These are not specific to the text of the Bible, so I find them irrelevant and really just mud in the eyes. There's a lot of systems that have sprung out of text from the Bible. I'm not going to talk about those. Unless it's something I think is intrinsically in the specific text we're looking in, I'm not interested in it. As far as who I am, I have a bachelor's degree in biblical studies, and I was a missionary for 5 years. I took 2 years of biblical Greek, but I'm by no means a biblical scholar, so I assume many of you out there are going to be much better versed in the text than I am, and better biblical scholars than I am. I am just simply doing this as the conduit for us to collectively think about these things. And I think, especially for people who are believers, we don't ask questions enough without already believing we have an answer tucked away. So my hope is you'll come and wrestle with me, you'll ask these questions to God alongside me, and I also want to say I believe that whether it's about becoming a Christian or becoming a wise person, what's more important is the ever more engaging and the growth aspect, not the arriving. Especially in a Christian context, we tend to think of people as saved or unsaved, as Christian, as non-Christian, and wherein there is some validity to that, I don't think it's the whole show. And in fact, I think it blinds us to continuing to grow and to wrestle. It's all about wrestling. Okay, third and final fear is that my God doesn't approve of me doing this. There's a natural dynamic in doing this podcast of a paradox between being both humble and extremely prideful. Humble in the sense of I'm coming out there and I'm saying I don't know any of these answers. Prideful in the fact that I'm going to God and saying, kind of pointing my finger at him and saying, I'm this speck, but I deserve these answers, God. But at the end of the day, there's this line from the end of the movie, A Man for All Seasons, that, I would put on my tombstone if I was going to have a tombstone. So the movie's about the historical figure Sir Thomas More. At the end of the film, he's going to be executed by the English government. And so he's walking up to the guy who's going to chop off his head, and he's saying a prayer. And then the executioner asks him, right before he's about to kill him, are you so sure that God will have you? And Thomas More smiles and says, he will not refuse one who is so blithe to go to him. So in all this, my prayer is, God, even though I'm questioning you on a bunch of fronts, my heart is only to be accepted and to know you better. And surely the God that I believe in will not reject me because of that. So, I hope you're along for the ride. Let's get going. See you at episode 1. Peace be the journey.